And we're recording.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Rust and Wasm Working Group meeting.
I'm sorry, that was just so good. What?
Yes, I thought of that this morning when I got out of bed. Uh, so,
We have fun.
yeah. There's a new RFC in case anyone is not following the repo. This is expressing NPM dependencies of a Rust-generated Wasm thing. Ashley wrote it up. Thank you very much. So everyone, please, yeah, this is like a big question that's been open.
I can actually, I want to say one thing about the RFC because it's a slightly different format than we've used previously. So this has been kind of a contentious topic because there's a lot of guiding values that present internal inconsistencies and conflicts. And so the RFC kind of talks about two parts. One is like how, assuming I have an NPM package, can I like talk about it, like import or require it into my Rust? And that syntax I think is pretty uncontroversial. The more controversial part is about whether we want to index those things in a manifest file. And so the RFC actually talks about 4 separate solutions that we have been talking about for like literally the last 2 or 3 months, I think. And it's worth noting that one of them is actually at least partially implemented in Wasm-pack right now, and it is not the one that we want to go with. We present 4, but we say that we like 1, but we're really interested in hearing people's thoughts, and we thought it was valuable to express all the things that we thought about. So there's maybe a little bit more in there, and so if it's confusing, let me know and I can try and clean it up, make it clear.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, everyone should go read that and leave comments and things. All right, should we get into 2018 triage, or did anyone have anything else on that topic? Okay. So let's look at, once again, the blocking release candidate list. So number 1 thing on that list is determine how to express JS dependencies in Rust crates. And now we have an RFC, so that is very awesome to see. In fact, maybe we can just point people at that RFC and close this issue.
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay.
I will do it right now.
User-facing documentation overhaul. Should
we actually close it if the RFC hasn't been merged yet, though?
I think so, because all of the action is going to be on the RFC now.
Oh, okay, like,
yeah. I don't think there's any point in having 2 things kind of open for the same thing.
Got it. Okay, yeah. So like that eventually will come to some conclusion on the RFC, and like it's going to get merged in some shape or form. Got it. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and then like any kind of tracking issues are probably going to end up in like Wasm-pack and Wasm-pack
right,
like themselves. So
yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. We can close it then.
The user-facing documentation overhaul is same status, just like pretty much waiting for us to publish WebSys, and then there'll be just those last few items about WebSys, and it's good.
And build for Wasm-pack, I think. Oh no, not for this one. Not for this one. Yeah, never mind.
Oh, you're talking about the other documentation overhaul.
The other documentation overhaul. I'm like, oh yeah, we need build for the CI. Yeah, no, never mind.
The massive PR I have open for that, by the way, will be merged regardless of completion so that people can start picking stuff off because it's been open way too long. It's too big of a thing to put in a PR. So apologies for that.
Yeah, I'm very much like gung-ho on landing lots of incremental changes.
Yes.
That's a good way to work. Adding extends attributes to JSys types. This is like mostly done. I feel like the things that are left are things that mostly JSys doesn't even have bindings for yet. I think it's in a good place, and probably we can just finish it off pretty quick here. Um, so Sandil isn't here, but I know that he started doing some CI stuff for the Rust Webpack template. Do you have any updates on that, Sven?
No, I don't have.
No.
It looks like Sandila just said they're waiting for the Wasm-pack build command in the issue.
Okay.
Is there a reason that it has to be on the build command and can't use init for now? They're basically aliases.
So actually, I changed it a couple of days ago, and it uses the init command now.
Oh yeah, no, there's an open PR for it.
Okay, yeah, I thought I saw something come through about that and that it was no longer blocking.
Yeah.
The reason that we're changing it is because init doesn't really describe what it does anymore. It does build, but it's the same steps.
Yeah, so I just threw the PR into the group chat. It's number 31 on Rust Webpack template.
Okay, it looks like the CI is not passing yet, so that makes sense why it's not merged. All right, but it seems to be on track.
Yes.
And then publish the WebSys crate. Do you want to talk a little bit about how that's going, Alex?
Yes, so we are actually getting really close. There was one major refactoring for gating a lot of the crates on features, which is now landed, and so like it compiles much faster by default. Other than that, I think the main thing we have left is callbacks, though we want to make sure there's some story for the callback types in WebIDL, so you can set event listeners and all that good stuff. And we're making good progress on that. I just posted a PR to kind of enable us to actually do the rest of it. And once that lands, it should be pretty easy actually to add that to WebSys. And I think after that, that's pretty much everything.
Yeah. So gotta check the checkbox for the feature gates. So for the people who aren't familiar with the feature gate thing, this is basically if you want to use some interface in WebSys, there's a feature for every single interface. And so by default, we won't really do any code generation, and then you enable the things that you want. And this brings compile times down from, what were they, like 20 seconds to if you only do like one, a handful of seconds.
Oh, we're talking like on my really, really fast computer, it was taking like about a minute, maybe a minute and a half to compile the whole crate. And it's very long. And this is in debug mode. And nowadays it takes like a second at most.
Okay, awesome. So the remaining checkboxes are a DOM manipulation example and supporting WebIDL callbacks. I don't know if we also want to support callback interfaces and how necessary they are. It would be good to get numbers with that bash script that nasty abomination I put in some PR.
Yeah, I'd have to look into. I don't actually know what WebIDL or callback interfaces are in WebIDL, so I'd have to look at that to see how much we need to design for that.
There are dictionaries where every single member is a callback. I don't know why they're different from dictionaries. But
we can deal with it somehow. That shouldn't be too hard.
It seems if we support dictionaries and callbacks, then supporting callback interfaces should be really easy.
Yeah.
All right, so that is like, I would say that's super close. Whether or not we actually publish it in 1 week, I think we're just on a great path. All right, so that's all of our issues. Should we jump into 2018 goal status updates?
I guess the one thing I would ask, just because we're going through blocking release candidate issues, is do we think that that list is complete? And if there's anything that's maybe missing? Like notably, there's nothing on Wasm-pack or the Wasm-pack template in there, which certainly is blocking. I don't know if we want to sort it out in the meeting right now, but I probably should go through and make sure that that's represented. I know we have some blocking 2018 tagged issues on the repo that aren't in this list, but I can figure that out.
Yeah, so the lists we were just looking at are specifically the blocking release candidate, which was like the current 6-week cycle. not the overall 2018 edition. But like, my understanding was we were using milestones in Wasm-pack instead of the labels.
Oh, okay. The milestones are still there, though they certainly need updated dates.
Yeah.
If dates are not correct. But I did go through and triage all the issues and mark everything this morning.
Awesome. Yeah, the one downside about milestones is that they don't show up in our list because there's no way to have milestones across organizations, which is kind of crappy.
Yeah, you can have projects, but that adds a whole nother shenanigans. That's not necessary. Anyways, it's cool. It's just always good, like, looking at those lists to be like, are we sure it's complete?
Yeah.
And in terms of timing, so this release on the 13th, it's coming up next week, is the RC1, I think, of the 2018 release. But none of Wasm Bindgen compiles on stable yet. October 25th is when all the features will ship to stable, so we will actually compile on stable at that point. And so we have between October 25th and December 6th, I think, to kind of test out our whole experience on stable Rust with Wasm and everything. And so like that I think is the best time for making sure like we have a really solid experience, like almost ready to go, and like that's just pure polish period. And so in terms of blocking for this release candidate, it's a little less critical because we're all like effectively nightly only because not that many people are using beta. So I think it's okay to have to let a few things slide. But October 25th, I think, is the much bigger deadline where we need to make sure that everything is nice and solid for October 25th.
Yeah, agreed. And like, since most of our stuff isn't actually shipping in Rust C, it's all a bit like hazy. It's just to keep us kind of on track and making sure we're keeping these things in our head.
Exactly.
And then the other thing I want to mention is, like, I did not forget about Wasm-pack, but in our 2018 goal status updates, like, there's a Wasm-pack thing. So I figured we could just
I had no worry that you forgot about it.
Yeah. Okay. Just wanted to make sure. All right. So I don't feel the need to really talk about WebSys because I feel like we just covered that. And the next one is Wasm-pack. So would you like to talk about Wasm-pack some, Ashley?
Yeah, sure. So I was gone for like the last month and a whole bunch of really awesome stuff happened. I'm sure there were updates in the meetings that I missed. We are waiting we'd like to do an 0.5 release. And the thing that's blocked on that is some work that DataPup, who is not here today, is working on, which is one of the big changes is we're now, if possible, downloading the pre-built binary of the cargo commands, like Wasm Bindgen. But we are not respecting lock files at the moment, and that's kind of important. So before 0.5 goes out, we need to have that done. And then in the meantime, there's a bunch of other stuff going on. I have a very large docs PR that needs to get merged. We have been vaguely waiting on like snip, opt, and config files. I am actually not entirely clear where we are on that, if there's been any other conversations. I see PRs and issues still open, but I don't know if that's been discussed in the past meetings, Nick?
No, we haven't really discussed that. I think we should definitely not block the next release on it. I think we want to get the cargo lock thing landed and then do a release.
Yeah, it's already too big.
Yeah.
I'm like starting to write the changelog already because it's going to be a big one, which is great.
Yeah.
So.
I think I would like to review those PRs because I feel like it doesn't make sense to really support Wasm snip or Wasm opt or anything until we can like configure them in a cargo toml. Because like, I mean, Wasm opt, like kind of there's sane defaults for that, but there's definitely not sane defaults for Wasm snip. Like if you're using Wasm snip, it's like you need to be very involved in the process. And
there is an open PR for toml configuration. I don't think it's all the way there, but there's at least a start for it.
Yeah.
And we'll want to land that first before we land the other, especially snip.
Yeah, I would like to see like without looking at the actual code, like what we want the configuration to look like, and then like make sure that the code actually does that, and then get into like, the nitty gritty of like, is it idiomatic or whatever, right? But like, I feel like that first step of like agreeing on what the configuration's shape should be is like probably the first thing we should do after cutting the release.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else?
I don't think so.
The Wasm-pack test subcommand.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's yours. So you
That's
should talk
finally
about it.
green. Yeah. I'm pretty happy about that. That took a long time to get green, but so that will actually download Gecko driver, Chrome driver, whatever, so you can run headless tests. And then it will run the headless test for you, or Node. Okay. All done with Wasm-pack?
I think so.
All right. Sven, any bundler updates?
Not really. I'm just looking for feedback and waiting that people use the template. But there's no much work to do left.
Okay. Is there like something we can do to help get people using it? Like, would it be useful if we, tweeted out some call for feedback, or like, hey, try this out from the Rust Wasm account?
Yeah, that would be cool. So the thing is that the guy that came to the meeting last time, Nick Graff, is doing a course about that. So I think we can gain a bit of traction with his course. So
cool.
Nick is using the Webpack template?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I can ask, but as far as I understand, I think he's using the Webpack.
Got it. One thing that I do think is important for us to tell as a story, like at some point, is we have two templates, and the trick about them is that they both actually use our workflow and use Webpack at the moment, kind of. So people are going to ask, like, which one should I use and why? And I'm not sure we have a good story for that right now. I don't think it's urgent, but certainly seems like a story we need to tell.
Yeah.
So the place, I think, where that is supposed to be told right now, and then whether or not A, it actually does tell that story, and B, is discoverable, is on the book. There's like a project templates reference page. So if you haven't read that, I don't know, then like read it and tell me what you think, or like also ideas for like how to make that more discoverable, I guess.
I mean, we can maybe put some notes into the README, like why would you use this? Something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that makes much sense.
Yeah, and I think it will also help when we get like more templates as well, like parcel and rollup and stuff. And then it'll be, I think, more clear, just like that there's like, oh, there's the like template for when I'm using Webpack and the template for when I'm using rollup, and like hopefully like more choices will make things more clear.
Yeah, I think the interesting part is, so like a template for rollup is going to be significantly more akin to the Wasm-pack template, which is the Wasm-pack template will work. And then we have like a create Wasm app npm like init template. And that npm init template should probably just take an argument as to what bundler you want to use. Because right now the create Wasm app template will just default to Webpack. And so my thought was that that thing will default to Webpack, rollup, or parcel, And so the real question is like, who do you want running the tool chain? Do you want Webpack to run the tool chain, or do you want like to run the tool chain yourself? Is really the question, which is like a more difficult question than like choose your bundler, because there's actually like two ways to use Webpack with our workflow now.
When you say the tool chain, do you mean the Wasm-pack compilation?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so the question is, do you want Webpack to run Wasm-pack for you, or are you like running Wasm-pack yourself?
So we do have a plugin that calls Wasm-pack, and Webpack is calling that plugin. So I mean, the idea would be to create a plugin for each bundler.
Yeah, no, I understand that the bundler, like Webpack, there's a Wasm-pack plugin now. Yes. But I think there's a question of whether or not you want the Rust toolchain to actually be invoked by Node, or if you want to just invoke the Rust toolchain and then like shoot it off into space, and then the JavaScript developers use a Node environment. So like the real distinction for me here is, do I want to be doing a ton of, like, do I want Node to do the lifting for me, or do I want Rust to? Even though it's like, do you want Rust calling Node or Node calling Rust? Which is why it's like, I think that's like a difficult question to ask people, because I think that they're not sure what they want. If that makes any sense at all.
To be honest, I'm not sure to understand.
I guess I'm just saying there's like a fine distinction between them, which makes it somewhat complicated to help people choose which they want.
And like, it's reasonable people could want different things in different scenarios, right?
Oh,
or like
totally. Right? I completely agree with that. I guess I'm only talking about I think it's an interesting challenge to help people know which solution best fits what they want because of the slight distinction between them.
Right.
That's the only point I'm making. I think they're both useful. I think just helping people make that choice is tricky.
Yeah, and it ties into like, am I writing a library or am I writing a whole website right now? Right.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the biggest decision makers there.
At least the way I see it, that's the biggest difference between the two templates.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah. Okay. Are we ready to move on? I'll take that as a yes. Sandil's not here to talk about the website, and nothing's really happened anyway. Not much there with debugging and templates we just talked about. So I think we can move on from 2018 status updates. And so the next thing in the agenda I added is, this is something that's come up and people have filed issues on both Wasm-pack and Wasm-bindgen, and like other people are telling me out of band that this is an issue that they're running into, which is, so I've got some Rust and Wasm as a library that works well when I run it on the web, or it works well when I use it with Node, right? And so like in isolation, it's great, but then I want to publish it to NPM, and I want other people to be able to use it on either Node or the web, and I don't want to have to like recompile or anything like that. And that's kind of tricky because we like, module imports are different, ES modules versus like common JS require. And it's, sometimes you can do the like UMD thing where you like stuff things on like a global, but it's hard. And we don't really have a good solution for this. And it seems like this is something that everyone's running into who's like having initial success. And then when they try to actually like get to like deployment or whatever, right, this is the issue that people run into.
So I can talk a little bit about this because this is something that I brought up with Alex like extremely early on, mostly because of an issue someone filed probably after the first release of Wasm-pack where we supported CommonJS, which it's just so amazing. I'm like, this was like 4 months ago. Gosh, we've been working on this for a while. So when we were able to have Wasm-pack support multiple types of exports, like you could have it for CommonJS or you could have it for ES6, the very first thing somebody asked was, I want to create both at once, which is what you're talking about, Nick. And so the main issue, and Alex, certainly jump in and correct me if I'm wrong, is so we can generate a WASM file and then we generate a module wrapper. And on the face of it, it would seem like, okay, why don't we generate multiple module wrappers and you can like use it wherever you want to. And the reason that that won't work is because the WASM file itself refers back to the module wrapper. And I don't believe that it can refer to two different things. And now this is where I'm like hazy, because again, this conversation was like literally 4 months ago. But I believe that the fact that the WASM file refers back to the module wrapper file isn't load bearing, or there's like another way to do it. And if we could change how that works, we'd be able to enable this. So Alex has unmuted. I'm ready.
And so just to make sure I understand this, how does this actually work in Node? Like, do you publish like two compiled versions of your JS where like you say, if you use this bundler, here's all the code for you, use this bundler, here's all the code for you. So the idea is we want to publish multiple versions of Wasm bindgen stuff where like this is this style, that's that style? Or like, and not publish multiple versions, but they're the same grade or the same
package. Not for bundlers. Sorry, go for it.
Yeah, so I guess I would look at packages that do get used a lot of times in Node and the web, like Moment.js, for example. And a lot of times then they do have like their original version, and that's all required. Well, there's really two scenarios. Either that's pure JavaScript, and then it's usually written as like a bunch of CommonJS, and there's imports, and then they use something like Browserify to package up another, uglified, small JS package. That gets more, but then you have the other scenario where if they're using something like either TypeScript or Babel, then a lot of times all their source files are using ESM, and then like Webpack is able to read that and do all the tree shaking and stuff off of that. So then that points at the original source, and then Webpack takes care of the uglifying and everything after the fact. And then they usually then just have a Babel version or a TypeScript compiled version that then is converting into CommonJS, and then they're basically just hitting one or the other. But yes, usually then when they're pulling down the package from NPM, there's usually two options, whether they're a single file or just two different directories, but there's always two different versions to support both CommonJS and then.
Oh no. You're back.
We lost like the last 2 seconds, but it sounds like it was.
Yeah. There's usually two. My point was there's usually two. When NPM pulls it down, this is the browser version, this is the Node version, and sometimes there's even a third that this is the core. Like here's my TypeScript, and if you want Wasm to go, or sorry, Webpack to go tree shake that, then you can even point at this third one, which is the, pure, new version.
ES6 one.
Pure,
yeah.
Okay, so in that sense, it's definitely not the case. Like, we can't publish one WASM file that somehow works amongst all of these, because you're right. Well, the WASM file has to point to something, and the WASM file has to point to something, and it has to reference some path, and someone has to eventually interpret that, and it's probably going to be like Webpack or probably Webpack that's interpreting it. I mean, I don't know. This is where I'm not entirely certain. We're like, I guess. So here's a question. Do we want to publish, like when you publish Rust code NPM, do you want the default version to be like the Node.js compatible stuff, and then this like second version is saying like, oh, if you're Webpack, but read all this stuff instead? So we have like basically the CommonJS version, which is the default, and then the Webpack version, which is like, oh, this is ESM, you can tree shake that and do all that.
So there's in package JSON, there's like this main field, which is supposed to be like the main entry to your JavaScript package. But there's also a browser field, which is like an extension, but supported by every, like Webpack and Rollup and all the different bundlers and stuff.
Yeah,
and
browser is a new key. The one thing I would say is like that key only matters to bundlers and only by convention. So it's not actually load bearing. Like from the npm side, like browser is like a brand new key. The fact that it's in the docs at all actually surprised me. But it doesn't actually do anything unless you use another.
I think all the bundlers do support it pretty much, though, right?
The bundlers do. I guess I'm trying to say that like it's not like, I don't know if anybody saw the like let's make a spec for package JSON, but like this key is like what caused that shenanigans. So I'm just saying like it's not, it's load bearing, but it's used as a signal like as an npm package. Like bundlers will use it, but it doesn't like do anything from like a npm side of things.
Would it be possible to just generate a file that's ES modules that the browser field's pointing at, and then a compiled common JS version that and even Babel or TypeScript could be used for that conversion, or it could just be compiled out here. But then the main points at that, and then the first thing that either file does is inform the Wasm file of which one is instantiating it, and then now the Wasm file knows which, because it's never going to call both. It's just like when it gets loaded, it needs to know, is it that is it that somebody's calling me because is the JavaScript that's calling me main, or is the JavaScript that's calling me browser? Essentially is all the Wasm file I think needs to know, and then it should be able to point back at the appropriate one.
This isn't necessarily a runtime decision, though, in the sense that
Right.
for common JS, the instantiation of the actual module happens explicitly. Like, we'll replace the module with like a tiny JS shim, which will use the WebAssembly JS API, and like it assumes it's like synchronous in the nodes, so it doesn't matter. But then for the ES6 version, it's relying on the bundler to know how to actually instantiate the Wasm module. So it actually has no instantiation code at all, and it just kind of assumes it all works out.
Well, okay, but I mean, yeah, just a second, really quick. Okay, here would be the key question in my mind. If I run it, if I take the ES module version and I run it in Node 10 with experimental modules turned on, does it still run with no shim? It'll just run straight.
It's also because of how experimental modules is implemented currently. So I don't.
Okay, but
this is mostly a facet of the fact that no browsers or Node included interprets Wasm files and ES module. Only bundlers actually do that right now, and so it would require another shim for that.
Yeah, because I guess I was thinking, so really there's three options then. There's I'm being instantiated by a common JS shim. I'm being instantiated by from the Wasm files perspective. I'm being instantiated by this ES shim. I'm being instantiated without any shim, or I'm being instantiated by a common JS shim. Is that right?
I believe so. I don't think
so. So I guess I'm wondering if we can say, okay, if there's no signal passed, then we assume that it's a bundler, and then just pass the signal if you're doing, common JS or, Node or ESM. Yeah, I think it just, and this is the problem is to support backwards, to make sure that everything's backwards compatible, at least for quite a while. All NPM packages are pretty much going to be assumed to have, here's my common JS version, here's like my old browser version that's maybe UMD, and then here's my new browser version that's ESM. And so it's almost like the Wasm file is going to have to know which one of the three that it is, or that's instantiating it. If that makes any sense.
I think it's safe for us not to support old browser versions because they aren't going to have Wasm in the first place. And if someone is targeting them, they're going to be using like Wasm2.js to like compile the whole thing down to JavaScript.
So one thing I think that we should do is there is definitely a lot of complexity here, and there's a lot of really good stuff being said in this meeting right now that I would want written down, because this is all actually documentation that we're going to need to explain to folks. So I would love to like have a design meeting that maybe produces an RFC for this, so that we can like get some documentation. Because I think a lot of the things we're talking about right now, like the relationship of Wasm-bindgen to all of the different module supports and how we want that to work, is something that we kind of talk about, but we kind of just assume like you'll sort it, like you just pick one. And so I'd love to have like a meeting on this and like get some stuff written down and then like write out a plan for how to make this happen. And I think a lot of this work, is going to happen in both Wasm-bindgen and in Wasm-pack. So having some sort of like group chat about it with a design seems like a good idea to me.
Yeah, so I started a list for people who are interested in continuing this conversation to sign up in the Dropbox paper. So just drop your name there and I'll send out a doodle.
How much of this is documentation that could be worked on currently as in its current state with modules? And then how much of it is like, we're gonna have to do this eventually because we don't have a technical solution to it yet?
I think we don't really have a technical solution for this.
So we can't even do documentation on it yet to answer the question.
Well, I mean, I'm talking about documentation the way like RFCs have guide level and reference level documentation sometimes within it.
Yeah, prior art style documentation.
Just like that the RFC will help us clarify the thinking and thoughts about current behavior and the behavior that we want.
Yep.
And so when the technical solution lands, we'll have a bunch of stuff ready to go to drop in docs to like help get people started.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, that works for me.
I guess like also one kind of stopgap we could do is you could just build the whole thing twice and not share a WASM file.
That is what I was thinking about doing in Wasm-pack 4 months ago. And I was like, I don't like this, but it's not, it's not necessarily a terrible idea.
Yeah, maybe that's good enough. We should, weigh that against other alternatives. Yeah.
What was that? I missed. Someone said something.
Especially for a short-term solution.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like we're not really talking, at least, again, I'm just starting, so I'm sorry if I'm misunderstanding, but it sounded like, before we were talking about the goals for 2018, that optimization was not one of them. So I could almost say that this getting rid of the one is something that could be, make it work for people and then optimize a way that could later be classified as we want to reduce the size of the package that we generate. That's an optimization that could be made later by having it be one file instead of two.
Yeah, also the fastest way to get contributions is to give people an unoptimized solution, because people love making PRs to optimize.
Yep.
All right, let's move on from this topic since we plan on having a follow-up meeting. The next thing is the website for NPM packages that would make good crates and then could be published as WASM. Corbin, do you want to talk us through this idea?
Yeah, so basically Ashley and I were talking at RustConf, and I was talking about how, at least for my company, one of the things I've been working on is trying to port Isaac's Stacks.js into Rust in the thought that then it could be compiled back into Wasm as a drop-in replacement for Stacks. Like I even set up a bunch of a whole test suite to make sure that it would run in the most popular packages that depend upon Stacks. And so, and I haven't had any time to work on it, unfortunately, recently, but I'm super excited about this idea. And I was thinking it'd be cool to create a website where people could suggest and then even volunteer to work on modules. And I think the key would be to say that what it should be is these low-level ones, like the Stacks. I don't want to, we'll talk about this too. We don't want to send the message of all Node should be rewritten or all JavaScript should be rewritten in Rust. That's not the message here. The message is there are some great NPM modules out there that would make great crates. There's not, I looked, there's not a XML crate, pure Rust XML crate right now that does everything that the Stacks parser does. So A, I think it's a great crate to just have if it gets ported over. And then B, then it's something that I think these really low-level system crates, if they have a drop-in WASM replacement, especially because there can still be a JS fallback. If it's so you can just say, hey, if you're using an older version of Node, if your browser doesn't support WASM, well then it just falls back to the old Stacks JavaScript, which is just slower. And so I think there's a lot of these low-level modules that could be identified that'd be great contributions to great things to have in the Rust ecosystem, and then also could be then published to NPM as Wasm that would just speed up everybody's node projects, that should be just transparent to anybody, like the guy who writes the Excel. There's a really big NPM module that's Excel parsing and writing, and that uses stacks. So I'm not sure how much faster this would make it, but it'd be really nice if I could. My thought was really, really nice if I can do a PR to that guy and be like, hey, if you use this in new node, it just gets faster and everything's the same. And, and again, I don't think that project should be rewritten in Rust, but it would be, I think there's a lot of these low-level crates that would be nice to have, low-level packages that would be nice to have in the Rust ecosystem, and then also would make everybody's node better. So that was kind of the idea, was create a site where people adjust them.
Yeah, this kind of came up, and I think it's funny because I had pitched something vaguely like this to Nick and my manager, Till, where I said this, like, are we Wasm yet? And it's funny because, Corbin, I think you came up with the same URL, and we were kind of talking about this, like, we don't want to, like, make it look like Wasm is supposed to kill JavaScript because it's not at all what we think. But one of the things, you were saying low level, but one of the things that's kind of like the bane of any node developer's experience is native modules. So also trying to check out like what native, like what packages out there are using like some C or something. Like a good example that I talked about with Corbin in this was this parser called a Niguruma, which was the bane of my existence when I was working on the NPM Markdown parser. And a bunch of people have started trying to port that to Wasm. And so like a lot of people ask like, what can I use Wasm for? And particularly because we're not trying to have people write like full websites, we're like talking about this library experience, giving like, so people love to-do lists, right? And so like having like a list of these would be great candidates, or maybe not even a to-do list, but like these are things that people have already done, can kind of help us with answering that question of like, what should I do with Rust WebAssembly? And I thought it was a great compromise between the like rewrite everything in Wasm versus not thing.
I like that idea of like having a showcase of like existing success stories that can be like a model for new projects. The other thing is like, if we're gonna like start putting random packages on a like an actual to-do list kind of thing, like I would want to have buy-in from the package maintainers probably. If the goal is to upstream it again. If the goal is just to create a Rust version, then like, obviously anyone can do that whenever they want, right? But if our goal is to like actually upstream again, we should be collaborative.
Yeah, I think getting people's consent before like advertising it is a good idea.
Yeah.
But I think it would be really cool. And as someone who's helping on the website, we could use some content, and that sounds like some really awesome content.
Yeah, I think like finding particularly like parsers are an area where we know like we have a pretty good story. We've had a lot of success like porting parsers to Rust and having them be faster and et cetera, and like it kind of, I don't know, it fits the Wasm memory model and everything. So that's like a category of things to look at, like just like what are the most popular parsers on NPM? Like, yeah.
Well, and then what part of why I was excited about the stacks one was then part of it is I'm trying to then eventually create a crate that manages SOAP, which does not exist at the moment. So this was a precursor to that as well. So
yeah. Cool. All right. So yeah, lots to think about. I think this is probably not something to focus on until after 2018 edition, just because like I think we have our plates full trying to like just get the experience how we want it to be then. But
I mean, unless Corbin wants to start doing it.
Oh, Yeah, for sure.
I mean, I've started, and I can't promise anything, but what I can do is definitely I can start and continue, and then also give feedback on how easy it is to do this.
That would be awesome. That's like exactly what we need.
Yeah.
So there's 2 projects I'm working on right now. One is porting stacks. To your point, I probably should ask Isaac if that's okay. Anyway, but then
Isaac will probably be into it, is my guess.
Okay.
I know that I've talked to the NPM team about rewriting parts of the CLI tool, and they've always been like excited. So
yeah, I guess I more had kind of approached some of the people, big dependers on it, and was going to just let them know, hey, this is in theory a drop-in replacement, and then if it detects that WASM isn't available, then it already depends upon the existing one, and it just drops that. It just uses that instead. And then the other one I'm working on right now, which is super obscure and I'm sure nobody will care about, but I'm working on porting Couchbase's database driver protocol into WASM for this same, because it's the native module that my projects depend upon, and it makes me want to scream. So anyway, so those are the 2 at the moment.
If when you get into a good place where these things are actually usable and you feel like it's a success, if you want any help like writing up the story about that, or like just like feedback on drafts or anything like that, like I'm super happy to help. I think probably other folks here are happy to help.
Sounds good. Yeah, because I come from the higher level languages. I guarantee you most of your criticism will be, that Rust isn't performant. But I would be very happy to have people tell me, no, I shouldn't have done it that way. So.
Well, it's useful because we also want to make it easy to write performant Rust, both from this working group standpoint and greater Rust's standpoint. So
yeah,
still very useful.
Well, and at least in all the tests I've done so far, it's like my totally unperformant version is at least 3 times faster than what's existing. And my hope is that if somebody can help me, that maybe it'll be 20 times faster. So.
Nice. All right. Any more thoughts on this website and /npm packages thing? Any agenda items that have not been added to the agenda that people would like to talk about? All right, that's it. Thanks for coming to the meeting, everyone. See you next week, and have a great time.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.